Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this webinar. This is one of our monthly Colibri Garden webinars that we run on topics surrounding holistic health. My name is Mags. I'm the head of integration and a retreat facilitator at Colibri Garden. I'm also a writer and a plant medicine integration coach. At Colibri Garden, we facilitate sacred medicine retreats and ceremonies. In Colombia, we run retreats with ayahuasca, and we also organize ceremonies with ayahuasca as well as Wachuma, Sweat Lodge, and Cambo. Today, in this webinar, we're going to explore how gut healing relates to mental health and what we can do to improve our gut health, and also how plant medicines like ayahuasca can help in this process. We have with us Ashley Oswald, who is a gut health expert and functional nutrition dietitian. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks, Megs. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So just to give everybody a little bit of a background on Ashley's experience. She began her career, Ashley has a robust background in nutrition science, having completed 7 years of formal education in the field. This includes a competitive internship at Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. With 15 years of experience in the medical field, she has dedicated over 12 years to her role as a dietitian. She began her career in some of the United States' leading hospitals, where she ended up working mostly in surgical and burn intensive care. Her responsibilities included placing feeding tubes and closely monitoring laboratory results, medications, symptoms, and healing processes to adjust nutrition care plans accordingly. Ashley later focused on feeding partially or fully through intravenous nutrition, which is crucial for patients whose intestines are unable to absorb sufficient nutrients due to severe illness and/or resections. Seeking to address health issues more proactively, she was invited to transition her work to a doctor-led functional medicine private practice in California. After this, she returned to Minnesota and established her own private practice. In this role, she collaborated with a local pediatric functional medicine clinic that specializes in autism, as well as a metabolic clinic in New York City that features some of the top physicians in the field. As her practice grew increasingly busy, Ashley streamlined her focus by exclusively seeing clients at Oswald Digestive Clinic and began hiring additional staff to support the clinic's operations. She's also on faculty at a well-known and respected functional medicine academy. Now celebrating its 9th anniversary, Ashley's favorite part of her role in leading the clinic is in reading the testimonials from clients. She is committed to continuing ODC's mission of helping people to improve and reverse bothersome gut issues, and aims to provide insurance reimbursements whenever possible for many years to come. Outside of her professional commitments, Ashley embraces a more nomadic lifestyle, which is where we met actually in Medellin, a couple of events and workshops. And she's also embarking on a new project that involves creating mini documentaries and videos. This initiative aims to interview experts and educate others about ancient healing modalities from around the world, particularly those involving plants and practices that engage the subconscious mind. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Megs. I'm happy to be here. And as we go throughout, if you guys have questions, I'd open it up and we can have more of a conversation on different topics. And if it's more of a personal question, you're welcome to email me after as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So if you have questions, like Ashley said, that are relevant to what we're talking about, feel free to pop them in the chat or use the hand raise function. And then we'll also try and leave some time at the end for Q&A as well. So Ashley, first of all, I'd love it if you could set the stage a little bit for this conversation about the gut and explain to us in more detail how digestion works.
Yeah, of course. Digestion's I find it really fascinating, and I hope you guys will too as we go through it. So really, digestion starts when we just look at food. Because when we look at food, our mouth starts to produce saliva, and in that saliva, we have an enzyme amylase, which starts the breakdown of carbohydrates for when we're going to actually eat the food. So just by looking at the food, it creates the start of that saliva production. And our mouth actually creates 1.5 liters of saliva a day, which is 6 cups, which is quite a bit. And then we eat the food, and of course, more saliva is produced to help that breakdown. It goes past the pharynx, which is right here, and that's where it has a divide to the esophagus or into the tracheal for the lung. And this little flap called the epiglottis closes as food moves through to make it go down the esophagus, which is basically just a food pipe. So the nerves read that food is coming and it starts this movement in the esophagus, which is about 10 inches long. And that movement, the peristalsis, helps to move the food down the esophagus, past another sphincter between the esophagus and stomach, into the stomach. And you can think of the stomach as a lake. So this is a reservoir, and the stomach is supposed to be very acidic to help further the breakdown of food. And especially protein starts to get broken down here. And it's really meant to turn food into more of a um, liquid, not necessarily totally liquid, but more liquid so it can pass into the small intestine. And so the stomach's supposed to be very acidic, and it has a very strong mucus lining to help protect it from this acidity because that's what helps break down the food. And different hormones help the stomach release different gastric juices to help with the breakdown. And so, something really notable about the stomach that's really common is for people to have low stomach acid. And sometimes it's from medication use because acid reflux is one of the most common gut issues. And so the prescription of proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers are these medications that actually decrease stomach acid, but they're only meant to be used short term. However, people tend to get put on these for long term, and that can really cause issues because with decrease with low stomach acid, it's supposed to be acidic, that can cause us to not properly break down and absorb different minerals and nutrients. And we have research that long term use of these medications could actually lead to deficiencies like vitamin B12, which can actually cause memory loss and brain damage. So it's something as simple as that. So as we go through today, you're going to hear me talk a lot about unpeeling the onion and root causes. And I think the best thing we can do, and some people are very used to this, other people aren't yet, but whenever we have a symptom or have some sort of chronic disease or something off in our health, we want to think what's the possible root causes that could be contributing to or causing this, and just going layer after layer. Because sometimes if we go to the conventional medical system and we say, hey, I'm having acid reflux, they might right away put us on this medication and not question beyond that. But we want to think, why? Why am I having this reflux past this valve that's supposed to be shutting the stomach to the esophagus? And sometimes it can actually be low stomach acid, which could be because of stress or other factors. So that's the stomach's role, and it's really muscular to help churn that food and break it down. And then it starts to trickle down into the small intestine. So there's another valve that it goes past between the stomach and the small intestine, the pyloric sphincter. And it trickles through over the course of many hours into the small intestine. And this is where most of the absorption happens. So the stomach's not absorbing a lot, maybe some water, alcohol, and a few minerals, but most of the absorption is in the small intestine. And while our esophagus is 10 inches long, our small intestine is 20 feet long. So you can imagine a lot of surface for absorption. And also, it's not just flat. It has all these crevices, these villi, these like crypts to increase the surface area to make absorption even more likely. So if somebody's having inflammation from, a lot of different root causes could be causing that, they might find that the health of these villi and microvilli, so it's like the villi, and then there's even like villi on the villi, so a lot of surface area, it can get inflamed, and that can prevent and cause issues with our absorption and digestion with the root cause inflammation of that lining. And so the small intestine, it's broken into three different parts. The first part is largely for helping to further the breakdown of the food. So we have the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder connected to it. And there's hormones in the stomach that signal the pancreas to release enzymes. And then the liver creates bile that gets stored in the gallbladder. And that bile gets bolused into the small intestine after when we eat a meal, when food comes through. So that helps with the breakdown of the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, which are the macronutrients that all food is made up of. And then the micronutrients would be more the minerals, the vitamins, and those components. And so the first part of the small intestine, that's where the breakdown happens. And also there's a bicarb that comes in. So the food's turning from being acidic in the stomach to being alkaline in the small intestine, that natural conversion. So then it moves into the second part of the small intestine, and this is where a lot of the nutrients get absorbed. And then the third part, some more nutrients get absorbed, and you can actually Google what gets absorbed where in the small intestine if you're curious to dive more into that. And then an interesting thing about the small intestine is that actually that lining, it creates new cells. That whole mucosal lining turns over to be new every 2 to 3 weeks. So that's really exciting because if we're having problems in our small intestine and damage and inflammation, like I mentioned, it's really encouraging that if we can change like the foods that we eat that can align more to improving those issues or support, maybe the stomach needs to have more support, maybe some lifestyle changes to improve our health, it really has this ability to regenerate. And so that's the intestine mucosal lining every 2 to 3 weeks regenerates. In the small intestine, that where most the absorption happens, that is every week. So that's really cool that our body has this natural healing process. So then what's left of the food, a lot of the fibers and some water, it goes into the large intestine, the colon. So the small intestine, 20 feet long, the colon's a bit shorter at 5 feet. And we have our appendix there, which some new research shows that the appendix, that used to be the organ that we thought, oh, we don't need it, we don't know what it does. But we think that maybe it holds good bacteria for us, probiotics. So if we do have infections, maybe it boluses that into the intestine to help us fight an infection. So that's the newest theory and thought and research on it. So it's very interesting. But the large intestine is so interesting because all that leftover fiber from the food comes here, and this is where most of our microbiota is. And microbiota is the bacteria, the viruses, the protozoa, the fungi that is all healthy and natural in our gut. And I say healthy because there might be some unhealthy components. And that's an interesting thing in the gut health field right now because really this microbiota, we just began to understand it in 2005. So it's very new. So if anybody tells you like, oh, this is exactly what your microbiota should look like or XYZ, maybe lab companies are trying to sell specialty labs. Yeah, sometimes it can be useful, but it's really important to understand too, like what we still don't know. And we can look at healthy people, see what their microbiota is, and say, oh, this is probably about what would be healthy. Maybe somebody has an overgrowth of one sort of bacteria that's causing issues, but also it's really the whole community of it and how it's working with our body. Because E. coli, for example, we could think of that as bad. Oh, E. coli is bad, but all of us have E. coli. Most of us have E. coli in our gut. So it's a very interesting conversation. Um, and what else did I want to say about that? So we have this whole microbiota in our large intestine, and they eat those leftover fibers. And actually, 10% of our calorie needs come from this fermentation process of creating these short chain fatty acids that then get reabsorbed into our body and are really powerful anti-inflammatory nutrients. So, for example, say you're eating like apple or onion or chia seeds or a lot of these fermentable fibers, that bacteria will eat it, create something called butyrate. And then butyrate is very anti-inflammatory, so it can, in a roundabout way, help to heal our gut, those plant foods. And then we have 100 times the number of microbial genes as human genes in our body. So this we're going to talk a little bit about this later on in this conversation because when we talk about the plant medicines and how they can affect our body, we do have some research showing that the microbes in our gut can affect how our body absorbs DMT. And so does it work the other way around? We're not sure, right? But that's interesting in itself and how might our microbiota then affect our absorption of different plant medicines. And then the last thing I'll say about that that's also interesting is that it's always changing. So we could change the foods we eat, and the bacteria in our gut can change within a day, which is also really encouraging if somebody is needing to heal their gut health. So that's that. And then the food comes out in stool, of course. And we have this mesentery that holds all of these organs together. And when we look at our stool, that can give us really good information about how the health of our gut is as well. So the color and the formation of the stool. So 1 to 3 bowel movements a day. And if somebody is not having that, we have to think about, what might be the root cause not causing that. If you've ever heard of the Bristol stool chart, you can Google that, or I can send you, we have a blog on our website you can search for. And between a number 3 and 4 would be a normal stool. So anything less is more constipation, more is more diarrhea. And then the color of stool should be a brown color. So if it's like a dark red, that can be a sign that either something as basic as you're eating like red food dyes, or something like bleeding lower down in the gut that we have to look into. If it's lighter in color, like more white, that would be a sign that there might be some liver or gallbladder issues that we want to look into. If it's yellow, it could be fat malabsorption or an infection. If it's green, maybe somebody's eating a lot of green foods, or it could be a bacterial infection as well. And we can use some herbs to help rebalance and get things back into balance there too. If it's black, then it could be bleeding higher up in the gut. So all these signs that we can look into. But hopefully that gives a good foundation of how things work, because when we're thinking about why somebody is having symptoms, it's really important to know what the normal processes are in the gut, so then we can figure out what might be contributing to their symptoms. Because, for example, if they don't have a gallbladder, that would be something really high up on my list to think about. How can we support this person without a gallbladder? Because that can affect the movement, that peristalsis of the gut, and could be a factor contributing to maybe they have chronic constipation.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ashley. This is so fascinating. And before we move on to the next question, I'm just curious, what are some of the medications that you would say are kind of like the worst offenders in impacting the stomach acid that you were talking about? I know antibiotics have quite a bad reputation for killing some of that gut bacteria.
Yeah, antibiotics are, there's research showing that just a 7-day course of antibiotics can cause a change in the gut microbiome for 2+ years. So I think the
Wow.
biggest thing about antibiotics, I mean, it's amazing we have some of these new technologies for when we need it, but they're also used a lot when they might not necessarily be needed. So we just have to be really judicious in the use of them and asking the doctor, do you think I really need this now, or can we wait a little bit and see if it starts to heal on its own? Maybe using different herbs. But stomach acid medications, the most common ones are proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers. So like Prozac, did I get that name right?
Hmm.
Okay. And uh, the biggest thing is, and I saw this all the time in the hospital, people would get put on them and just not taken off of them because they aren't getting connected with the right people to support them in healing the possible root causes causing the acid reflux. So that's usually the breakdown in the healthcare systems. Now, if somebody's listening and they are on one of those medications, just know I've helped clients get off them, and you can too. Sometimes it takes changing some foods around, changing some lifestyle factors. But the biggest thing to know about going off those medications, of course, work with a doctor on it, but you can't just stop them. So if you just stop them, you're likely going to get rebound acid reflux. And then you're going to think, oh, I still have acid reflux. I'm going to have to be on this forever. But it's just because that rebound acid reflux happens. So you want to just taper off really, really slowly over the course of 2 to 3 months. And just slowly, slowly taper so your body can adapt. And once you're almost off of it, you might also want to use different supplements to help support the stomach acid back up. Also, decreasing chronic stress, of course, can really help that process just because of that connection on stomach acid production.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And that's
Yeah.
quite a nice segue into our next question of talking about the chronic stress. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about the gut-brain connection. I think this is something that's becoming more and more prominent, and I think we're learning more about this kind of as lay people. And one of the most basic ways we see this is when we get a piece of bad news or we feel anxious, like oftentimes we feel that in our gut, like lose appetite, feel sick, things like that. But yeah, going further than that and more deeply, I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about the gut-brain connection and how it works.
Yeah, of course. Have you guys heard of the vagus nerve? Can you raise your hand? So it's this nerve that connects our brain to our gut. And so this communication between the brain and the gut can happen a few ways. It can happen through this nerve, and also can happen from chemicals. We now know also these microorganisms, these bacteria, viruses, fungi, they communicate. And that's what I had mentioned about 100 times the genetics from microbes as human genetics in the body. So it's just kind of wild to think about, what are we really, more bacteria than even human genetics. So it definitely has an influence. And the research shows that people with gut health issues are more likely to have things like anxiety, depression, even autism. There's some really interesting research on autism because, and of course, it's all a spectrum. So I'm not saying every single case, but we have some newer research where they're actually doing fecal transplants into people, like kids really struggling with autism. And the research shows that their autism significantly improves. And so if there's anything, that's very profound. And also, we know that if somebody is struggling with depression and we put that stool into a mouse, that mouse is going to be more likely to have signs of depression and mood issues. And so our gut, the surface, is more than our skin. So you can only imagine how much that influences things, our whole body and our brain. And we do also believe that the gut sends 9 times more signals to the brain than the brain to the gut. So I'm glad that this is becoming more accepted. Even just 50 years ago, the gut brain connection wasn't, you'd be looked at sideways if we were having this conversation in some settings. And now it's becoming very well known because because of some of this research and understanding. An interesting thing is that the main medications for depression, these SSRI medications, we are now also, there's new research within the past few years, we're starting to rethink our understanding of serotonin, which is that neurotransmitter that we always thought of as like the happy neurotransmitter. And that's what these medications work on. They work on the serotonin, which is always like the happy neurotransmitter. Now they're thinking that these medications might be working actually from a similar way that the plant medicines work, in the sense of neuroplasticity. And I can send this research link because it's really interesting. So there's a whole rethinking of the serotonin hypothesis for depression. And maybe if people are finding that the medications help, it might be helping in a way that, from neuroplasticity, and creating new pathways of thought, which can help us change our perspective of life in different challenges. So maybe the serotonin helps more with the perspective of difficult events that happen in our life versus just trying to increase this happiness neurotransmitter. And then lastly, the microorganisms and that communication with the brain, and the us knowing that adding probiotics can help with different mental health challenges as well. And then the immune system too. So 70% of our immune system is in the gut, and sometimes mental health challenges can be have a root cause in inflammation. And so, if our gut is contributing to inflammatory cascades in the body and it's affecting our brain through this brain barrier, that could be contributing too.
Wow, thank you. So fascinating. I'd love it if you could maybe tell us some stories of clients that you've worked with who have experienced improvements in their mental health after healing their gut.
Yeah, of course. And I'm going to share this at serotonin, one of the researches, in the chat. And you guys can Google too. I'm sure there's others. So I wrote down a handful of stories, some of the most profound ones. And actually, we had a testimonial come in a few days ago that I want to share too, because that's really interesting. It's somebody that was getting symptoms of drunkenness without drinking alcohol. And so it was very confusing to them. So I'll share that one in a bit. Some of the shorter ones I have is I was working with a woman who was struggling with depression, and she was on the autism spectrum too. And we added in, there's some research on meat for depression. And so I'm not saying that this is for everybody, but we did add in some meat for her. And she noticed the instant benefit of that for her because it was within, she said within an hour of eating that, her depression would loosen up and she would feel better. And certainly there could be other factors there too, right? Because she really struggled to maintain like a real whole foods eating plan and eating like a healthier vegetarian vegan diet. But for some people also, over time, they find that veganism, vegetarianism doesn't feel good to them either. So we have to always trust our intuition in this. And when people ask me, what's your like nutrition vision or what's your protocol that you do, and I don't use any protocols. All I care about is my clients getting better, our clients at the clinic getting better, and partnering with them and figuring out what we can do to improve their symptoms. And that's not black and white. Nutrition is not black and white. There's so much gray and there's so much personalization in that. So I just wanted to add that because I thought of it and I see a lot of fighting, in the nutrition field, even with people not like in the more professional side of it. And I always try to say that because it's better if we can just get along and understand, it's not one size fits all. There was a couple teenagers I worked with at the autism clinic, and this is one of my favorite stories because they were bigger guys and they had autism most of their life, and their mom was really struggling with anger issues from them. And after one appointment and us changing some things to help their gut health, they stopped being so abusive. Like she no longer was afraid of them. So they would have these anger outrages that were like scary to mom, and that stopped after we made some food changes. And this was a few years ago, but I think we added in a few supplements too, but it was all gut focused. Another kid I worked with at that autism clinic, his OCD improved by 70%, which I was not expecting at all. So when mom told me that, I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And we were just focused on gut health there as well. I have a couple clients who have schizophrenia. And by changing food, and in both these cases, it was blood sugar balancing and cutting out gluten. There's some research showing the connection between gluten and schizophrenia. They noticed significant improvements in their symptoms. A lot of anxiety and stress that can be improved with magnesium. It's estimated that 70% of people are deficient in magnesium, and stress can actually deplete the body more of magnesium. And uh, let's see. My own story is I had severe acne when I was 11 years old. Um, Pushed to go to the dermatologist, even though I fought it for so long. And I didn't know at that time why, right? I just didn't like doctors. I was 11. And I was put on over the years pretty much every medication. Like my dermatologist ended up firing me because nothing was really working. And ultimately, there was one medication I was put on that was making me suicidal, and that was a side effect of it. And a lot of those medications, they affect the gut health. So when I got put off of it, the suicidal like verbiage, as a kid, went away. And eventually, we just weren't even thinking this way back then. But once I started studying nutrition in college, I realized the connection between dairy and acne. And I totally cut out dairy and the acne went away. And then I had to heal my gut from all those medications and antibiotics over the years for the acne. So it just makes me wonder, thinking back, right? If I was starting to have that symptom of all that acne, if the culture was to think about, oh, what's causing this versus let's go and try to fix it with a band-aid like a medication. And then the last story, I'll share is about the drunkenness. And if anybody's watching on the recording whatnot, and you're struggling with gut health issues, I would really encourage to go read our testimonials from our clinic on Google. Not just because I'm trying to promote the clinic, but honestly because you'll read those testimonials and realize that some of our clients had issues for years, sometimes since they were like a kid, and they were able to improve and get rid of a lot of their issues. So the body really does have an amazing ability to heal. And sometimes people just fall through the cracks of the medical systems because the system is more for acute illness, and it's not always amazing for chronic diseases like this. So this drunkenness case, this was the latest testimonial we got, and they mentioned how it's gut fermentation syndrome. They didn't know it at the time. They worked with a clinician at our clinic, and ultimately he was slurring words, falling asleep, making poor decisions, had no energy, and we just did a few things. Cut out all the carbs because that was causing the fermentation. Used a herbal blend supplement to help rebalance the gut bacteria, use probiotics, and it went away.
That is so
So it's very
fascinating.
exciting. There's other stories of like migraines and headaches, um, doing little tweaks. And I had an intern once with horrible insomnia, and just replacing magnesium got rid of her insomnia. So
Wow. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of those. That is, yes, amazing stories. Clearly doing amazing work at the clinic. Um, I'm wondering what kind of magnesium would you recommend supplementation, or is it kind of different for different people? Because I know there are a few different kinds, and sometimes it can be confusing to know which one to choose.
yeah, it can. We have a few videos up on our YouTube channel about magnesium because they tend to be popular videos. So you can learn more there. But basically, magnesium threonate can be helpful for brain related symptoms. Magnesium glycinate is a really just go to for most things, sleep, anxiety, and it's a bit cheaper. And magnesium citrate can be okay if somebody is struggling with constipation. That could actually be a really nice one to help with constipation.
Hmm.
If
Okay.
diarrhea, of course, you want to avoid that.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Um, and yeah, I mean, we've spoken so much about the importance of gut health. I'd love it if you could share with us some practical piece of advice, some key ways that you have that you suggest we can use or implement in our lives to improve our gut health.
Yeah, of course. It's really similar to what we had mentioned about thinking about the root causes first and foremost. Just always asking why, what might be at the root of this. And in functional medicine, we have an analogy of unpeeling the onion. So we unpeel layers, and we might unpeel one layer and then we reevaluate our symptoms and say, oh, this got better, this went away, but I'm still having this. So we think about what's the next layer to unpeel, what's the next layer, and each of those layers, it might be food changes, it might be lifestyle changes, it might be different components. And so the root cause, when we talk about how digestion works, right, from looking at food all the way out till stool, we want to think about how is that whole system working in a person. Because sometimes people are eating a really healthy diet, actually, and they come to us and they might be eating like 15 foods and they'd all be considered healthy, but they're still struggling with issues. So then it's really clear to me that there's some sort of imbalance in their gut. Maybe they had a period of stress in life and the motility got messed up and they have too much bacteria where it shouldn't be, bacterial imbalances. And that's when I say, we can use different herbs to help with that. I've had clients too where it was low stomach acid, and we use like betaine. It comes from beets, but this can be used to help increase stomach acid, and we want to get as upstream as possible. So chewing food, then the stomach, right? And I've had some clients who are just doing that one thing, got rid of 95% of their gut issues that they had for years, which is pretty remarkable and amazing, but also makes a lot of sense, right? Because we're supporting the gut, and then that motility and everything. And so really root causes, like two people could come to me with the same symptom, constipation, but the root cause of it could be different for both those people. It could be the food, it could be the stress, it could be they had their gallbladder removed at some point, it could be bacterial dysbiosis, it could be low stomach acid. And then testing can help give us more information too, but usually looking at all the symptoms together can be enough to know where to get started. And sometimes too, if somebody really not tolerating a lot of foods because their immune system is going crazy when they eat a lot of different foods, then we want to look at the health of the gut barrier. And we could use different nutrients to help heal the gut barrier. And that goes back to what I was mentioning to prevent things too. how when we eat those fibers and plant foods from fibers, and believe it or not, most people get way, way, way too little like plant foods in their diet still, in many countries. So, but when we eat those and that large intestine, those bacteria eat it and create those short chain fatty acids like butyrate, that's one of the best things we can do for helping to heal that gut lining on an ongoing basis. There are nutrient deficiencies. So this has different root causes in itself because over the years, our soil has become a bit more depleted in different nutrients and minerals. So that means our food is going to be lower in different minerals that most of us have gone through a time in our lives where maybe we weren't eating the healthiest. Maybe it was when we were a kid and out of our control. But the reality is, for those years, you weren't getting in enough nutrients like vitamins and minerals. And that could lead to different deficiencies. And also, often we go through times in life where our body has a higher demand for different nutrients, like I had mentioned about stress and using up more magnesium. Stress also can use up more of other nutrients. And I'll finish this thought, then I'll catch the raised hand. Thank you. So things like zinc and vitamin A, they're needed to help regenerate cells that line the gut. An inflamed gut needs more vitamin C. So if it's using up more vitamin C, we might get deficient in it because of that. Vitamin D, which can be really common in the northern hemisphere deficiency because we largely get it from the sun. We can't absorb it from the sun most of the year if you're above a certain latitude. And that's important for protecting good bacteria. Um, and if 1 in 6 people suffer from gut issues, then just having gut issues in itself can lead to malabsorption and cause some of these nutrient deficiencies. So, all to say, making sure that we have proper levels of different vitamins and minerals, and there is testing we can do, cellular testing to check that, can really help to support our gut healing because our body needs those nutrients to properly repair our gut. So let me see if I got to all the points I wanted to say on that, and then we can take some questions on this topic in general. So yeah, the foundation, real whole foods, can really be a great place to start for people when looking at improving gut health and then just seeing what symptoms we still have after that. Because a lot of people are still eating a lot of ultra processed foods and sugars, sugary beverages. So that's a really great place for most people to start. Marvin, did you have a question?
Ashley, thank you so much for everything you shared. When you were talking about the life cycle of cells and they renew themselves, there's a big conversation about fasting or water fasting, I don't know. And I would love to know your thoughts about, because I personally, would like to do some fasting and see how my body, my mind react to it. What are your thoughts on the gut health um, aspect of fasting?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. In fasting, the research we see it can really help with cleaning out, and this is probably why you thought of it at this point, cleaning out old debris, apoptosis, old cells. So intermittent fasting can be helpful for people. It can help with blood sugars. If somebody's pre-diabetic, there's research on that. For intermittent fasting, I usually say trust your intuition because on the flip side, for some people, it's could be not as helpful as avoiding it because if somebody's adrenals are being taxed or they're having hormone challenges, then often it can be better for them to eat consistently until they kind of get out of this more fight and flight stage of their life or time. But if you're feeling called to it and it feels right and you're not having those challenges, then I think it could be a really helpful thing to do a few times a week. And we actually have a video, one of our clinicians made a video for the YouTube channel diving more into fasting for gut health.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Marvin. Um, so Ashley, I'd love to now move on to the role of plant medicines. You have drunk ayahuasca, I've drunk ayahuasca. We hear many stories of different aspects of people's health improving with plant medicines like ayahuasca and others as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the role that medicines like this can play in healing the gut.
Yeah, and my interest in plant medicines and what I find most exciting about it is its ability to help us with our emotional body, our emotional health, and our perspective, and helping with that neuroplasticity to help us shift our life in a way that would be more aligned to what is aligned, I guess, for sake of lack of better word. So really helping with the subconscious mind because with gut health, it is a two-way street, and stress, chronic stress can be perceived chronic stress too. So we might be living a life and somebody else looks at our life, they're like, wow, your life isn't stressful at all, but we could feel that it's very stressful because that's our perception, and our perception of it is affecting our gut, is affecting our body. So I think that those plants can really help us with this. I've also heard stories of people sitting with ayahuasca and it was really the push that they needed. They got this push from the plant in their experience to make a change in their life that for so long they felt like they needed to do, that it felt out of alignment, but they had fears or they had other reasons. And I'd love to hear more from you, Megs, because you hear from these people regularly, way more than I do. But I noticed that, from sitting with the plants and hearing people's stories. And I think that's really exciting because sometimes we do just need that push. And if we can have that direct experience versus some outsider trying to tell us what is best for our life, and if it's coming from the inside, right? And even like meditation after and all this stuff, that I can see in a roundabout way can really help gut health just from improving the emotional health. And then, some of the research that we do have on some of these plants, like how psilocybin can help with empathy and mindfulness and traumas and MDMA and then ketamine and mood. It is, it's interesting, and I also have a note about what we had mentioned at the beginning about how the absorption of DMT, the research showing our gut bacteria can influence the absorption of that. So it does open up the question of, well, how are these plants affecting then our gut or our bacteria? And we just don't know, but it's possible, right? If we know it the other way around.
That is so fascinating to think about because obviously before we drink ayahuasca, we do a specific diet and we cut out certain foods. So I wonder if, I mean, there are many reasons that we do this diet, but I wonder if from a more scientific standpoint, part of it could be preparing the gut bacteria to better absorb, so that the stomach or the gut can better absorb the medicine. That's so fascinating to think that that
That
might be the
is.
case.
And that makes a lot of sense because our gut bacteria does change based on food changes within a day or two. It's very fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that is really, really interesting because obviously with the diet, we're cutting out processed foods, we're lowering salt, cutting out red meat, cutting out dairy. So yeah, I'm sure it's an individual thing, but yeah, I'm excited to maybe explore that a little bit through my own personal experience. And when it comes to people healing gut conditions and ayahuasca, I think kind of as you mentioned it, a lot of it is around the trauma release and the trauma healing that happens with the plant medicine. When we drink ayahuasca, like there's a lot of somatic release that happens. There's a lot of trauma healing that happens. And a lot of these autoimmune conditions, including, things like IBS and Crohn's and stuff, they can have roots in the emotional body. And a book, if people are interested in this, that I found really, really interesting is The Fellowship of the River by Joe Tafo. I know Marvin and Natasha are very familiar with this book. But I read it a couple of years ago, but I remembered that he had some case studies in there of people with different physical health conditions and their process with drinking ayahuasca. And because the author is a medical doctor, but he's also a shamanically trained ayahuasca facilitator. And before this call, I just had a quick look to one of the chapters which discussed this guy who had Crohn's disease from a very, very young age, had a very, very traumatic childhood, and lots of trauma in his life. And because of that, didn't have exactly the best lifestyle habits and nutrition habits that would support the healing of his Crohn's disease. But yeah, they mentioned in the book that he went from like going to the bathroom 15 times a day pre-retreat to post retreat and doing a diet with a master plant as well, only needing to go like three times a day. But like you said, a lot of it was to do with the changes that he was able to make as a result of the ayahuasca retreat. So yeah, I think there are multiple components to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's so exciting because I even heard a story of somebody who sat with ayahuasca. And even though they knew that they should be eating, more whole, real foods, it's that behavior change. The ayahuasca, they said, pushed them. And for some reason, they're able to finally make that habit that they had already known about. Um, and we know that reducing chronic stress, that's huge for helping improve gut health and other organs too. It's the research shows for decreasing chronic stress that there's better bacteria diversity, there's increased blood flow, the thyroid improves. Stress is one of the biggest things that can hurt the thyroid. And then our cells and aging become healthier as well because of different hormone benefits that we have from reduced stress. So it makes a lot of sense, that connection between the plant medicines, the psychedelics, and how they can help with not only gut health, but overall health based upon the emotional body.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're coming up to the end of the time. I have one more question for you around this topic. So I think you kind of, inferred to it a little bit before, but at the moment, there's so much information around nutrition, so many studies constantly being published that oftentimes seem like they have conflicting information. There are so many influencers on social media telling us that we need to cut out gluten, that we shouldn't eat dairy, that we should eat this, that we shouldn't eat this. Like, I'm wondering, what advice do you have for us in a world where there's just so much information and it can be really confusing to know what to adopt and how to approach our own nutrition?
Right. And that's why I always say it's really not black and white. Nutrition, there's so much gray. It's half science, it's half art. And so cross-checking everything with our own intuition is really important. Like, to the question of the intermittent fasting, I appreciate that so much because that is a big one, that really just cross-checking with our own intuition to know if it's right for us or not can help so much. There's also something called the Dunning-Kruger effect that's good to be aware of, because if somebody is new to an industry of knowledge, we can learn a little bit about that knowledge, but not understand a lot yet, because we all have to start somewhere, right? But what can happen with humans when we learn a little bit, we can have a high confidence in thinking we know a lot until we learn more, and then we realize how much we don't know, and then the confidence shoots down, and then the confidence slowly grows, like as we're in an industry for longer and understand like the big picture more. And so this can happen with influencers online, right, in all different sorts of industries. And nutrition is just especially prone to it. And so it's good to just be aware of that, and to look into the experience of who you're learning from. And that sometimes you don't need a lot of experience to help encourage people to like eat real whole foods and stuff like that, right? But if something doesn't sit well, it could be this. If somebody's telling you everybody should be on this diet, everybody should be taking this supplement, it's just not true. Nothing is one size fits all in medicine. So that can be really helpful. And then trusting your intuition. And if you're getting lost and you have these symptoms and it's just really overwhelming, I would really recommend seeking out somebody in the world of, more functional medicine. So I think that realm is doing a really great job at helping people with root cause. So it's what we do at our clinic, but there's a lot of different practitioners, probably in Colombia as well. I can imagine there's got to be some good practitioners that can help support you, because it's not so black and white. A lot of knowledge comes from experience as well, and understanding enough of what we know to understand what we don't know and what could help a person at each different situation. So it could just save a lot of time and frustration, seeking out somebody to support. And again, that would be you can look up functional medicine.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley. So before we open for any further questions that people might have, I'd love to just quickly ask where people can find you if they want to get in touch with you or work with your clinic.
Yeah, we have that free guide. So some of what we talked about today, a lot of what we talked about today is in the free guide. So you could download that and save it if you want this information saved. So just go to oswalddigestiveclinic.com/free guide. And I can put that in the chat here. And on our website too, there's links to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of free videos up on YouTube that could really help people. I see in the comments that people are getting rid of symptoms just by watching our free videos, which is always amazing to hear. And then my newest project, and I'd like to know if any, it's called Hosty Healing. And this is where I'm gonna be making videos and filming and helping to share about different ancient healing modalities in a way that is respectful to the roots of these medicines. And it's part of Megs and I partnering here. And I have some others. I'm very excited about it. So if you or anybody you know might want to partner with something with me on that new project, I'd love to hear. And you can just message me through that website. So that one is hostyhealing.com. And it's brand new. So we haven't created anything yet. So I'm just in the phase of starting to film and look for partners and helping to share information.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so excited for this project and to continuing to collaborate. Okay, so if anybody has any questions about anything that Ashley has discussed today, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat, or if you have any just comments, reflections, anything else you'd like to share.
And I'd love to know if anybody has sat with plant medicines and found that it's helped their gut health in any way, or um, what experiences you might have.
I guess I can speak personally. So I don't have any huge gut issues, but my intuition is that sitting regularly with ayahuasca or yahe, I just feel like it really helps keep my gut healthy, keep it strong, keep the microbiome intact. I do a lot of other things to try and support my gut health, like eating fermented foods and things like that. And other plant medicines that we have access to here in Colombia. But yeah, my intuition is that the physical purging process that we have with ayahuasca, I really feel like it's getting bad stuff out of my stomach. I know that's a very unscientific perspective, but just yeah, from my intuition and my feeling in ceremonies, like when I'm purging, I really feel like the medicine is taking out stuff that doesn't need to be in me. And I wouldn't be surprised if that contributes towards the health of my gut.
And that makes me think about, this whole field of quantum physics that's getting more attention too, and how they say if we took all the empty space out of the person, out of the atom, which we're all made up of, every human would fit into an apple. So then it makes me wonder, well, how are these plant medicines working on our energy body, right? Which is actually the foundation to like everything. And it's just
Yeah,
a big unknown, but very interesting.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think if people don't have any questions, we can wrap things up here. I'll also just share for anybody in the chat the link to our website, colibrigarden.com, and our Instagram as well, if you want to give us a follow. And yeah, I think many people will be catching the recording. So we'll be adding all of those details in the caption of the YouTube video and the recording as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for showing up, for being here, for contributing, and thanks Megs for hosting. Thanks Colibri for hosting, and it was really fun to get to share one of my passions in life with you all. And I hope it
Thank you
was
so much.
helpful.
It was amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate you joining us and sharing all of this wisdom. All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.